Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Alana McGovern-Register, and I am the curator here at Silver Plume Exhibitions. We are excited to have Dennis Wilson here today. He is going to teach us how footprints are made and show us how to make our own. Dennis is a talented paleo-sculptor whose work can be found in museums across the country, including the American Museum of Natural History, the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, and the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, plus countless others. We have worked with him for many aspects of our exhibitions, and he is a master at making molds and casts. For those of you joining us live, you can ask questions using the Q&A button on Zoom and the chat feed on YouTube Live. I will relay your questions to Dennis at the end of the presentation. So thank you, Dennis, for joining us, and I will let you take it from here.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. And is the other camera on?
Other camera is on, so
okay.
You are good to go.
Hi, I'm Dennis Wilson. I have a company, Pangaea Designs, and what I have the why I'm so fortunate is that I get to make life reconstructions of extinct and extant animals. And then one of the things, the process that I'm going to explain is basically how to make a quick mold and cast. And then from there, you can expand on that as you want, and with research and everything on the web. There's lots of information on the web about how to make molds. I was taught how to make molds at a museum. The American Museum of Natural History is where I got all my training, and they have very specific ways how they make molds and casts. And because of that, now I can actually mold and cast fossils, which a lot of people don't have that opportunity. And then also from that, I can make casts of the actual dinosaur bones and then start to build flesh on top of that. And that's what you see behind me are some of the life reconstructions. And then I'm going to give you a really quick, brief run through of some of the work I've done and how that is made, basically. So I'm going to try and start the video. Okay, is it up? Okay, so basically what I'm going to talk to you about is how my art is influenced through paleontological discoveries. So I just want to reach out to some of the younger people out there watching that I didn't start doing finished beautiful models. I started out just like everybody else with drawing. So here's an image from when I was 12. One when I was in 16, when I was in high school, and then 19 when I just had gotten out of high school. After that, I had always worked in 2 dimensions, and then from the getting bored with working in 2 dimensions, painting and drawing, I decided to work in 3 dimensions, and that led me to picking up roadkill. And so I started making art objects out of that. These on the left are talismans that were basically feet that I found off of birds. And here is a deer skull that still has some of the flesh on it. I ended up gold leafing or copper leafing the bone to show how precious they are and what a waste it is that they die on the side of the road. This is a horse skeleton that I had mounted for somebody. And then this is a dog skeleton that I ended up growing ivy. That was the whole art, and giving it a rebirth, so to say. This was all before I actually got my experience at a museum, even though it's based on a museum. And this is what is a fossil. So we run through different forms that can be fossilized: plants, bugs, and then the vertebrates, which are, this is Archaeopteryx and a fish. And then other things are trace fossils, which are footprints. And so that's what I'm going to focus on today, is the dinosaur footprint and what that can tell us. So here are grallator footprints. And as you can see the pads of the feet And on really good ones, you can actually see the scales of the feet. This is to show the evolution of dinosaur from a primitive to modern birds. So this is Coelophysis, Deinosuchus. You can see the toe counts all stay the same. And here the metatarsals are actually 3 separate bones when they're in dinosaurs, until we get to a more advanced one like Archaeopteryx, where they start to fuse. And then with pigeons, they're actually fused to one metacarpal. So this is another grallator footprint. You can see some of the texture here, and here's a modern bird. So what is a dinosaur and what is a bird? There really is no difference. Birds have evolved from dinosaurs, and that is sort of where I get my information from, is modern birds, and relate it back to dinosaurs. So one of the things we do is work from the inside out, since we're working with the skeleton, and it's basically like doing a forensic reconstruction. So this is a 2D drawing of for a police thing, police reconstruction. This is a rhinoceros skull. Here is the rhinoceros with the flesh on. So you see the big lips, small eye. This is the eye hole. Here's the nasal and all the teeth, but you don't see any of the teeth here because they're all back in the cheek. And then here is our horse skeleton again. And here's a modern horse with the skeleton and some muscles drawn on it. So if you're looking at a dinosaur and it has this long, skinny skeletal neck like the horse, you would never think to put the musculature like this. So one of the things that the bones do not tell us is the soft tissue and what it could be. So when I make a reconstruction, it's basically best guess, making an educated guess. So here is the skull that once found way back when. They had all this mythology around it and nobody knew what it was. So they speculated and they thought it was Cyclops. So it had the 2 fangs down here, and the hole, the opening was for the eye. So we go back to the bone, try it again as we evolve our reconstructions. And this is a conservative view. So here we have the eye, the fangs, nose, ears sticking out, which we'd have to speculate on. So is that accurate? So we're back to that, and this is what actually it is. So it's an elephant, and that big opening that they thought was the eye hole is actually the nasal passage that holds that huge trunk that's on an elephant. So when you look at that skull, you don't think about having it have giant ears and a trunk. So these are those kind of things that when I'm building a reconstruction, that's what I try to think of. And this is our process in 3D. This is Monolophosaurus. And this is a fossil cast. Then we make a mold and cast that, and then we can start to build our flesh on it. So we build an armature, and then we build out with foam, because if we made it all clay, it would be really heavy. So then we start adding texture. That's like rolling little balls and sticking them on one at a time. And that's all in like a plastilina type clay that never hardens. So we again make a mold and cast. And then this is what is the final product, which is in a polyester resin that we then can paint and put on display, and it'll hold up to the public touching and everything else. So what are molds and casts? Since that's what I'm going to focus on, this one process. Basically what it is we're making a negative or a void that we can then fill with another material to then put it out on display. So most of the stuff that I sculpt is in clay, and that would never last because it never hardens out on display. So because of that, we have to make rubber molds, and then I make plastic casts. So these are the parts in the mold. Here are preparing, so that's the negative void, and this is the plastic casts. And this is a shot of the allosaur at Denver Museum of Nature and Science. And we had to make a silicone mold on display while it was on display because we couldn't take it off. So did dinosaurs have feathers? Now we're going to get into more speculation. So the old view of dinosaurs is this green velociraptor toy that is basically scaly and has just wrinkly skin. But this is actually a more accurate version, is the feathers, and still green, but I like to break that stereotype, but I haven't, I mean, I made this one green anyway. And now, did dinosaurs have feathers? Here's a modern chicken that looks really awful without feathers. So if you think about modern chickens and them not having feathers, this is what they would look like. So when you think of dinosaurs, I'm hoping eventually everybody will think of dinosaurs as having feathers, at least the bipedal ones, and not looking like this. Those are mutations, by the way. So now this is a quick run through on how we build our life reconstructions. This is Archaeopteryx. We start with a cast, then we'll do sketches of poses. This one I was going to do on a nest, so that's the baby or the juvenile. Then I look at modern references. So here's some babies freshly hatched in the nest, modern crow, how they perch, and then I start building the model with the nest. And then the nest I sculpted off of a magpie nest that's common out here. And so it's built mainly with sticks, and that's, I try to reference as much modern stuff as I can when I'm building this stuff. And so one of the things I get asked is, how do you feather these dinosaurs? And I tell everybody that it's just like laying roof shingles, where you start from the back of the tail and you just end at the head. So here is the tail right here down the center, which is the cast. And then, like modern birds, all the feathers are around it. And all this is preserved in the fossil. So I'm using those measurements off of that to actually build this. Then I start feathering one at a time, building up. And then it's almost complete. The head is not on yet. And here we are, again, referencing back to modern animals. I use the secretary bird to get those long feathers. And these, you can see how they're hand placed. And we use a silicone glue that actually takes like 15 minutes to harden. So it gives it a little bit of time to adjust and readjust. And then we come back in and fill all that in to have the complete final model. And this is a shot of the final model with the baby in the nest and some eggs. And then, is that the correct color? So this is another question, is we never really know what color these guys are. They're getting some research on knowing that some birds or some dinosaurs had black feathers, or some had a pattern that gets preserved in the fossil. But for the most part, you don't really know. So these are the colors. They're all the same bird, all Archaeopteryx, and they are decided by the client. So the client, will say, oh, I want red, white, and yellow. And then that's about what they give us. And then we try to figure it out from there. And here's a couple other strange feathered. So Sinosauropteryx is a very primitive dinosaur. And this is one that the tail was preserved. The feathers around the body and the fossil were preserved to show that it had a ring pattern going down its tail. So I mimicked that here, and they think it was sort of a honey brown kind of color. And then this is Microraptor, and he's really a strange creature because he had 4 wings. And so that poses another question, like, how do you make hind wings on legs that you walk with? And how does that function? And does it work? Do you fly? Do you glide? How does all that come together? These are the fun things I like to figure out. This is Mononychus, and that means one claw. And so this guy was one of the first models I ever did. And I did it while I was at the American Museum of Natural History because I had access to the fossil. I was actually prepping the fossil for the exhibit. And then I decided to make this guy for myself, which, as you could see, these front claws, he had one big claw and 2 little vestigial digits. Vestigial digits are just little tiny like fingers reducing. And so this is, again, laying feathers one at a time. This was done in 1995, which was sort of right at the cusp of them deciding whether dinosaurs had feathers or not. And I made a scaled version of this, which is behind me there. And so that one I did, and as soon as I was done, the research had shown that they probably had these little pin feathers all over. So I had to go back and feather that guy. But it's a nice comparison to show when I do displays and stuff for kids or demonstrations. And this is Oviraptor on the nest. So this is about a 9-foot dinosaur. And it was actually, the fossil was actually preserved with it like an ostrich protecting its nest. It died on the nest. And then this is an Oviraptor embryo, which is right before it would hatch. And again, that was preserved in the shell as well. This is Confuciusornis, and this is where we're getting to see some evidence of preserved feathers. So here, these long tail feathers, which we think of birds of paradise and stuff like that, but these guys actually had them. So here's another one with the wings coming down here. And then this is basically a red-winged blackbird that I mimicked the coloration off of. Other feathered dinos, we have Caudipteryx, which is another early one. It actually has teeth and a beak, which is another strange thing. This is a modern dinosaur. This is alive today. This is an Edwards pheasant. And this one we did a sculpted feather, so we can do real and sculpted. This one we did sculpted because it was touchable. And then now these are from the Green River, and they are preserved basically like roadkill, where they're all flat. And so they wanted to do a diorama, and so we were hired to do these birds for them. Birds, dinosaurs, it's hard to say where that line is anymore. So these guys basically look like birds because they're that advanced in the evolution of dinosaurs and birds. And just to make another point, feathers weren't evolved to fly. They were evolved first to basically insulation. So the nights were cold and they would use them to insulate. And if they were in the desert or hot area, it would help to keep them cool as well as modern birds do. So these flight evolved later, and that's what we know as birds now. There are also big ground birds, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So moving on, these are dinosaurs today. So that's an emu. And as you can see, there's lots of different shapes, sizes, feathers. These birds of paradise with these big tail feathers, like the Confuciusornis, and then the colors. It's basically, you know, you have a blue-footed booby, which you would never think to have blue skin, or well, hardly you wouldn't think about having blue skin. I've done blue skin dinosaurs before. But most people think of them as green. So this is sort of the new look of dinosaurs. This is another project that we did for the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. And this one we had to remount the allosaur. So we had to, that's what that mold was for on the leg. And so we had to mold the leg so that we could bend metal to it to reinforce it because it was moving. I don't want to say it was falling over. And then, so what do? You can pay somebody to hold it up, or you can make a mold and then remount the metal. So these are some nieces that I had come out and do an internship with me for their school. And then this is the completed project. We ended up, not only was it moving, but a lot of the pieces were coming off the mount. So we had to reattach those and secure it, run new supports to the ceiling. And we put a newer cast on of the head so that it updated that, because the last skull was completely fabricated. And that's the other thing, is a lot of this stuff, it just keeps updating. So you think you know, and then some new discovery happens, and then you end up changing everything. This is a project that I did with a friend of mine, Rob Gaston Design, and it's a 30-foot croc, Deinosuchus, and we built all the post-cranial, which is everything past the skull. They just had skull pieces, but the Utah Natural History Museum wanted to put it on display, so we decided to go ahead and sculpt all this. How we did that was we ended up taking a 10-foot alligator, have a computer scanned and blown up to a 30-foot alligator, and then reconfiguring those styrofoam pieces to match what the fossils should look like. This is some other projects. These were done for CSU. These are exploded skulls, which we basically take them apart at all their sutures and then remount them. This was a megalodon jaw that we did for Tacoma, Washington, and at the aquarium there. And that's about a 7-foot tall jaw. Then we also do small things. These were bugs that were done for Fossil Butte National Monument. And that was part of that diorama with the birds. And then this was one of the lifelong dreams that I got to fulfill, was to go and teach in Mongolia. And I got to show artists over there how I do my work. And we did hands-on work for about 2 weeks on a skull of Velociraptor. So that was great. These are some bronzes that we did. We don't just work in plastic. We can also work in different materials. Once you have your mold, you can basically cast into anything. And so bronzes are done with a lost wax process, which is you cast out of your mold into wax, then you cover that with a sort of a ceramic shell, and then you put the bronze in. And so these were done for the Smithsonian, the Triceratops, Camarasaur, Tetracleodon, and this is a placental. So we did mom and babies. Then one of the last things I want to show you is the Pentacopteryx, which I did for a National Geographic TV thing or show. I think it was called Strange, I don't remember, Strange Things or something. Sorry. And so this was, we went to the actual site where it was found, and we unveiled the 6-foot long Pentacopteryx. And this is the coloration that I did for them. Then I was hired to do, for a traveling exhibit, to do another one. And this is, we changed the coloration up. So it just depends. Both of these could be accurate or totally inaccurate. It just depends on how you, what coloration you do, or I mean, what coloration you think it could be. So that's it. If you'd like more information, you can visit us. And then now I'm going to give a quick demo. If I can. Stop share. Am I back? Okay. Okay. I'm not on the screen though. But you can hear me? Oh, there I am. Okay. Sorry. Technology. Okay, so what we're going to do today is, when we were talking about footprints, these are casts of dinosaur footprints. So you can see they could be rather large, small, or in between. And this isn't even one of the largest ones. So when we're looking at this, you can see the pads on the feet. And then if we look at modern birds, this is a turkey foot. You can see the pads on the feet here. Very similar. And here is a modern emu, which they're almost identical with the pads. Okay, so hang on. So this is a cast foot of a velociraptor, and this is their killing claw. And then that from the trackways, they know that it ran with its foot up. And then these are the two that it kind of ran on. And if you think that's weird, there's ostriches and everything that run basically on one toe. So, and you think, you know how fast ostriches are. So this is, from the footprint, we know that this claw was up. So when you do a reconstruction of a velociraptor, like this one up here, the claws are usually up. Now this is a T-Rex toe. So just to show you in comparison, they can be huge difference as we have in modern birds. And the function, this is a pheasant, which spends a lot of time on the ground. It's not perching. This is a hawk. And that is a perching, and that's the claws for killing. So you have to think about dinosaurs if they were flying or walking. And then this is a, oh, this is a grouse, sorry. And this, again, you can see is very similar to that. Here are the pads under, again, if you can see that. And so from all this, oh, and here is a modern chicken foot. But not only this, where you can see the bottom of the foot that simulates the dinosaur footprint, but we also have the scales. So modern birds, to me, are basically dinosaur feet. I think you can see that. Okay, so on the emu foot, it's the same configuration with the 3 toes. And what we're going to do today is do a simple sand cast. We're going to put this into sand, make an impression, which would be basically like the bird making a footprint in the sand. Then we're going to pull that out and make a plaster cast of it. So the materials that you need are basically play sand, plaster, and I grabbed for a cheap container is these are just little soda cartons from the store. You just need to have a little bit of a wall on it to hold it. You don't want to go too deep. And then we're going to mix our plaster in a yogurt cup. So one of the things that, or you could just, you don't even need the play sand. If you have a muddy spot in your yard, you can go out and stick your foot in the dirt and then make a cast in that. So my dog was very kind and did that. So this was just from out in the yard that I went out and just poured the plaster in. And so what we're going to do today, oh, sorry, I want to show you a quick mold. I think we have time. So a basic mold is silicone rubber that's soft, and then you get a cast. Oh, then you get a cast out of it, which is plastic, and then you can paint it to make it look realistic, and it can go out on display, which also preserves the fossils for the scientists to do research on and study. This is a basic 2-part mold. And here we have, this is our plaster jacket. So we use plaster, not just for casts. And then this is our 2-part mold here. This is the silicone, the rubber. So we put the jacket on to hold it so it stays stable and safe. And then inside is your cast. And so when you pull it out, I don't know if you're gonna be able to see this. So when you pull it out, here's the negative with the footprints. Oh, I should turn it around. So it looks right. And then here's the positive cast with the footprints. Can you see that? I hope you can see that. Okay. So that's a basic 2-part mold. These are locks to hold it together. And so when you put it all back together, then you can rubber band it and pour your plastic in here and make another one. Okay. Hope everybody gets that. This is the hardest part when I'm teaching people like how to make molds, is the negative positive thing. Okay, so now we're going to do the demonstration. Can we switch to the other camera? Thanks. Okay, can you still hear me? Still hear me? Okay. So these are our cardboard boxes that we're gonna just take some play sand and fill. Actually, I'm going to move this one over. I think the lighting's a little better here. So you don't have to go this far. If you want to do your footprint, think about how big your foot is, and that's all the space you really need. I need the squirt bottle. It's the yellow one. And then, so if this is our dry sand, this is the trick now. So just kind of give it a rough smooth. And then we're going to take our emu foot and we're going to stomp it into the ground. So as you can see, the sand is moving. And when we pull it out, there's a slight impression. So on dinosaur footprints and other things, sometimes the impressions aren't very deep. This is from a rhea in South America that I had fortunate to get a cast. There you go. So you can see that it's not very deep. So the ground was probably dry, hard, not very muddy. So this, if we were to do this, there's not much definition. So the trick to making this work is take a little water. And you can see it sort of congeals it a little bit. So it's not as loose. If you don't have a squirt bottle, you can just sprinkle it with water. And then, and then we're going to take our footprint again and squish it in, come up. And now you can see the actual toes with the imprint of the nails and everything and the pads on the feet. So if we were to leave this, it'll dry out, it'll disappear. So we just came across this beautiful footprint. So now we want to preserve it. What we're going to do is take our yogurt container and fill it to about here with water. And then I'm going to show you how to mix plaster. And you can get plaster of Paris in your local hardware store or craft stores. Okay. Yes. Okay. So now we have a little bit of water. Now this is how you mix plaster. So I just take it and you sprinkle it in lightly. And what that does is you want the water, as you can see, it's absorbing. And what you do is you want the water to get all of the powder wet before you actually mix it. And so you keep adding until islands form. So now islands are starting to form, and that's about the right consistency for making a cast. I'm just going to put a little more in. Plaster is very forgiving. If it's too thin or too thick, you can add water or you can add back in plaster. Okay, so I'm just going to mix it. As you can see, there's a couple chunks, but as you keep mixing, it will go away. And if you just have a plastic cup, you can use the plastic cup, depending on how big your cast is. So what I'm going to do is fill these areas of the footprint first, because that's the more delicate. So all I'm going to do is just drizzle it in very slowly. So if you pour over here, it might squish in. So you can see kind of the shape of the footprint, which looks almost like a dinosaur. And now we're going to fill this and cover it all. And then if you were just to leave it like this, basically it'd be really thin on those high parts of the sand. So I just take my extra and just dump it so that it thickens it up. So there is our mold and our cast. And now through the magic, so you just want to let that sit for about 15, 20 minutes, maybe 30, depending on your plaster. Plaster goes through a warming trend. Like as it's curing, it will actually get hot. And when it cools down, that's when you know you can pull it off. So then we pull our footprint off, and you're going to have more sand stuck to it than this. And then basically you brush it all off. So you brush all your sand off, and you're left with a simulated dinosaur footprint. Or actually, it's actually truly a dinosaur because they're birds. So the other thing you could do, which I'm sure most of you don't have emu feet or turkey feet or something laying around, is you could take your own foot and put it in the sand and make your own trackway. So that's something that you can do, or you could use your hand. You could do it. There's lots of different things. Once you do this, you know, you can let your mind run on this, make molds, casts, whatever. If you have little toys, you could take them. This, where are we? This is a cast of a possum foot. I don't know if you can see it, it's pretty small. And so you could even take this, put it in, and now you have an impression of a possum. Yeah, always good for Mother's Day. Come here, Link. Come here. Hang on, I'm gonna get my dog. Come here, Link. You're gonna be on TV. Yeah. So if you have a cooperative dog, you could also have him stand in it, and then you get a dog footprint. So you can, if you don't like the way it comes out, just erase it, and then push your hand in or do whatever you want. I hope that shows up. So, and then you could then put the plaster back in. So that is a really quick, simple, easy way to make a mold. How are we doing on time? Are we good? Oh, I think we lost Alana. Just us. Okay, so basically that's the simple idea for a simple mold and sand cast, or simple sand mold. And then what you get is the positive, which is the footprint. Sorry, there it is. Oh, hey, I'm back. Okay, are we on? So anyway, this, whatever you can use your little dinosaur toys or anything else to kind of stick in the sand, see what kind of impressions you get, and then make a quick cast. If you're allowed and your mom and dad let you, you can actually go outside in the mud, stamp your foot or your hand, and make the cast or the mold in there, and then use the plaster to make a cast. So hopefully that helps you for a basic mold and cast. And if you have any questions.
Thanks, Dennis. Yeah. Sorry, our internet was a little unstable. I'm not sure how much we lost, but can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, the other thing that I was thinking is this is a really fun way if you're walking around in your natural environment around your house or something, and you see a footprint and you don't know what it is, you can maybe get a little plaster cast of it and take it to a natural museum to see what you have in your local neighborhood.
Exactly. Or if you're out somewhere, yeah. Plaster, all you need is water to mix it. So
yep, very cool. Yeah. Thanks for teaching us all that. So we do have a couple questions. The first is, and anyone that's following along, again, you can always send questions in the Zoom question and answer, or on YouTube live, there's a chat. So go ahead and ask your questions. But the first one is, someone wanted to know, do you use real feathers in your reconstructions? And if so, where do you get them?
Yes, I use real feathers mostly. That's what I'm known for now, is using the real feathers. And so on those that I use the real feathers, we get those from fly tying places. And those, they supply us. There's one that they just love us out in Delta. And they just love whenever I call them up and say I'm working on another dinosaur, because fly tires buy one patch and that's it. I buy like hundreds. So
nice.
And then also there's other hunting farms and stuff like that I get a lot of pheasants from them. So the problem is you need a lot of feathers to do one dinosaur.
Yes, that was the other question. How long does it usually take you to feather a dinosaur, say like a Mononychus or something like an Archaeopteryx?
Mononychus is like a smaller size. It usually takes about 3 weeks to a month to lay all the feathers on. So it just depends on the size of the feather. So Mononychus, we use these real skinny pin-like feathers. And that was really hard because all you see is the last little 1/4 inch of the feather itself. So when you're doing that and it looks like a needle, you have to just keep adding and adding. So. I can't hear you.
Okay.
All right, you're back on.
I'm back. All right, so another question we just got. What are some of the exciting actual fossils you have worked with?
Oh, there's a lot. When I was at the American Museum, I actually got to work on the T-Rex that's there. So
wow.
It was in the old pose, like the old style, had its head up, reared up and standing up, and they wanted to make it more level. So the neck was still all fused the way it was preserved. And at the time when they found it back, I don't know when it was, they did not have the proper tools or the technology to actually disarticulate those bones. So myself and another preparator, that's what you call people who work at museums, were able to disarticulate the neck so that they could mount it so it was accurate and level. So, and then Mononychus is one of my favorites. So I got to work on that one and prep it out and then build everything. And there's a lot. I loved working on the Allosaur for Denver Museum because that was a whole nother kind of challenge. The way I see it is like every project is a new challenge for me. And what if you're making a life reconstruction or you're working on fossils and figuring out what pieces are missing and what they look like, that's just part of the fun of this whole job.
Well, thank you so much, Dennis. This has been a lot of fun. And
great, thank you.
I love that this is a way to encourage kids to get out and explore their natural environment and maybe look at birds in a whole new way.
Right, and they can also find fossils around. So that's the other thing.
Yeah, so look into what is around you in your natural environment and what fossils may have lived where you do in the past.
Right.
So, well, thank you, Dennis. We're gonna sign off here, and I appreciate your time, and we're so happy to have learned about footprints from you today. That's very cool.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dennis. Bye-bye.